Just a quick word before this episode starts. Thanks again to the wonderful Kurt Metz. I'd completely forgotten to get him to do the next lot of artwork for the next few episodes. Message him on Facebook, he's come up trumps, and here the episode is. Hello and welcome to this, the 10th episode of the UFOcast. And before we get down to today's episode, which is the responsibility seat, I was going to say suit there. Definitely seat, isn't it, Michael?
No, it's definitely responsibility seat.
Definitely responsibility seat.
It's written down in...
I don't know, what would a responsibility suit look like? I don't know.
It would look just like Ed Straker's.
Yes, indeed, because he is a very responsible man in a suit, a pantsuit, I believe it's called.
But before we talk about the responsibility seat, what do we do?
Yes. So, I just want to say, actually, before we get into some newsy stuff, we have received lots of feedback. I have read it. Michael hasn't, because he doesn't have access to the email.
Nobody trusts me with pens.
Well, I should just send you the password. Our recording schedule has become a little constrained as well, so we're hoping to do some feedback, but that's we just want to say we are very grateful for all the feedback that you've sent, and we'll try to respond to it at some point in the future. On a slightly sad note, Michael, who did we hear about last week?
Sadly, I don't know when you're going to get to hear this, but it was Jeremy Wilkins' passing.
Yes. Oh, yes, because we're recording. We're recording this about a week and a half before it goes out. So it'll be a few weeks since the reporting of his death. But he actually died last year. It's taken a while for the news to come out.
Yeah, it's sad, but with a show that's this old, you're going to be getting people. Well, I mean, how many people have we lost already?
So for those of you that don't remember, Jeremy Wilkin is the skydiver engineer. Maxwell, I think, is the character's name. We've talked about him in previous episodes because of his crossovers with other Anderson shows, most notably as Virgil number 2 in Thunderbirds, and then his appearance in Doctor Who. But he had a long career, and by all accounts was a jolly chap, very different from the villainous roles that he liked to portray.
It's usually the case, isn't it?
Yes.
Whenever you hear about these people, if everyone is really interested in playing that kind of role, off they go, and everyone just thinks they're lovely.
Yes.
As always, sad, always sad.
It is.
Anyway, on the slightly better news, there's ShadowCon. Yes,
ShadowCon 2. There's a bit more detail coming out. So for those of you that didn't know, there's a UFO convention. Began last year, and the second version of that is coming this year. And they've started to announce a few of the features and the guests. So it's Saturday the 30th of June at the Quad in Derby from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's going on that late because they're showing Doppelganger on the big screen, which is the movie that preceded UFO. And the guests that they've confirmed thus far are Deborah Grant and David Collings, who were in the Psycho Bombs, which we will get to. That's a bit later in the series. Alan Perry, who was a director. I'm pretty sure we must have covered at least one of his episodes so far.
Certainly have.
And then Alan Harris, who was a regular background artist on the show. So they're all going to be there. And I'm sure there will be further guests to be announced between now and June. We've still got... best part of 5 months to go. I suppose it'd be 4.5 by the time you listen to this.
I must admit, I'm very, very excited about the whole thing.
Yes, it's sounding really, really good, isn't it? And you can book your tickets from
the Derby Quad website.
The Derby Quad website. Yes, yep.
But this time we'll be talking about the responsibility seat.
Indeed, we will. Yes.
Now, as always, these descriptions are just a bit weird, but let's go with it. Joe Fraser, a reporter, interviews Straker in his cover role as a film producer. But when he discovers that she is not from the newspaper she claimed to represent, he decides to go after her. Meanwhile, he leaves Colonel Freeman in charge of Shadow. Both of them learn quite a lesson. For Straker, the attractive reporter turns out to be a dangerous risk, and Freeman learns that the responsibility seat is a hot one to sit in. And as always, those descriptions are just a bit off, because, all right, that's kind of what the episode's about, but is it really, though?
That was, as usual, an interesting synopsis that you read for us, Michael. Do we think it chimes with what actually happens in the episode?
Well, to be fair, yes. I mean, it's a bit closer than usual, because your basic plot is, it's basically the whole episode is one of overreacting. And the overreacting A plot is just to distract you, while the B plot of what's-his-face, Freeman, taking command is enacted, proving that running shadow is harder than you think.
Yes.
Because the thing, it's fairly feeble, the overreacting plot. The one where Straker's like, oh my god, someone called me Commander. Yeah, you were called the Commander in, like, the world knew you as Commander Straker. You were, like, quite famous. You were in newspapers and stuff. People knew you were in the military before you became a producer, like lots of other people. What's the problem going to be? Oh, let's let it go. But no, we must overreact because it's a woman investigator. Dun, dun, dun. Freeman actually is like, well, if it was an ordinary investigative journalist, then that would be fine. But it's a woman, therefore they have their wily ways. It's appalling. That is basically what's implied.
Well, we're told on multiple occasions, it's a man's world, and you've got to do things to get by in a man's world, which I find interesting that they foresaw...
I've written that down in felt tip.
they kind of, as we talked about in previous episodes, they foresaw an end to racism.
Yes, but that's as far as we're willing to go.
Yeah, well, yeah, but they didn't foresee any advancement in relations between the sexes, which I think is somewhat amusing.
You know that talent. Bear with me. You know Talons of Wen-Chiang when they're saying, "Oh yes, this zeta particle experimentation was just a dead end." Is that how they saw sexism? Oh yes, this experimentation with women's lib, it's just a dead end and it will burn itself out. Is that what was going on? Because I have my doubts.
You know what? I suspect there are still some people around today who are hoping that's the case.
What? It's just a fad.
Yes. All
this 100 years of women being able to vote. All right, some women being able to vote. It's just a passing phase.
Well, I think the to get to current affairs, which obviously won't be current affairs by the time you listen to this, that whole President's Club thing. There are clearly people with ideas about women that you didn't think still existed in this day and age, but they clearly do.
Hang on. I've just in the defence, God help me for this thing. Remember, UFO is set in the distant future of 1980, and there were some things like the President's Club that might have been even vaguely acceptable in the 80s.
Oh yeah, no. I yes. It's just the contrast between them projecting racism being dialed down in the future, and
racism
it's
finished in 1975. Apparently,
yes. It's the predictions that they're making. So yes, of course, the fact that they're only projecting 10 years into the future, which means it's still almost 40 years in the past for us. These things don't surprise us. It's the idea that they were predicting things, and they predicted this one and not the other. But
But anyway, so
yes,
this Joe person who turns up in her weird wellies. I know Sylvia Anderson was a clothes designer at heart, but what's going on with what she's wearing? Well, I don't know. But anyway, she turns up because the camera lingers on her feet, moves up to give like Straker's eye view, except for the fact that he's got like very little chemistry going on with her, and then. Sorry, and I'm about to overreact with technology, but her handbag with the wires. Now, I know it's because TVs in 1970 were smaller, things had to be more obvious, but...
It's one heck of a bug, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, she might as well have got the reel-to-reel tape deck out and just shoved it down and gone, there you go, I'm just recording this because I'm an interviewer, that's what I do.
Oh, yes. So I take it from all that intro, you weren't particularly enamoured with this episode, Michael?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it turns into a few bluffs, really, because Alec is doing his best to run Shadow, because finally he's been allowed to be in command. Obviously, he turns to smoking straight away and gets the bloke who answers the phones in a lot to explain things to the audience, right?
Yes.
And poor bloke he is there. It was like, oh yeah, you're my mate with your bull haircut, and it's just blessed. So anyway, he doesn't exactly overreact. He follows everything to the letter, sending up as many Gerry Anderson spacecraft as he can muster on various missions, which prove all to be pointless. And while Straker does this other storyline, which, to be fair, is just a bit odd.
Yes. Well, so the Freeman storyline is somewhat reminiscent of the Scott Tracy storyline in Atlantic Inferno, which is Jeff's gone on holiday and so has to leave one of his sons in charge. And so Scott gets left in charge and does the same thing that Freeman does, basically. He overreacts and sends out the Thunderbirds to something that doesn't need the Thunderbirds going out. In the case of this, it's a weather balloon, isn't it, that they think is the UFO. Yeah. This is the other thing about this episode, is that this isn't really an episode of UFO, really, because you have the UFOs get blown up at the beginning, and then we don't actually know what happened to the third one. We just know that it wasn't a weather balloon, and then the rest of the episode is totally Shadow focused. Which is odd for a show called UFO, really. But yes, it feels like, this is a Gerry Anderson. At least the B plot, that bit of the B plot is, we've seen this before with International Rescue, and they're doing it again, and showing us why the character who's in charge is in charge. Because if you leave anybody else in charge, it'll all go wrong.
Yeah. So is Alec officially the second in command?
Well, this is another episode where... Is Paul Foster in this one?
I couldn't see him anywhere.
I can't
think
remember.
He's on holiday. There's absolutely no reference. Let me check the regular cast.
See, it's so long since I've watched it. I watched this about 3 weeks ago, and I'm like, is this one that Foster is in? Oh, no, he is. Is he?
He is. He's on the moon.
He's on the moon.
No, he's
yes.
on the moon.
He's on the
moon.
moon.
I'm watching him now, and he's on the moon in his big silver suit.
Yes.
Because he's the one in charge of jumping in front of a Russian... the Russian
Oh yeah, of course.
tanker.
How did I forget?
Hang on.
How did I forget that he was in this?
Right. Hang on. I've got some issues with the Russian tanker. And you can bring up yours in a moment.
Okay.
But basically, what's happening on the moon is an old discarded Thunderbirds plot. There's a place on the moon, a space station of some sort, and there is an uncontrolled vehicle hurtling towards it at a remarkably slow pace. And the camera keeps cutting to trundling vehicle.
Yes.
And then a bit of tension builds.
Yes.
And then it cuts to trundling vehicle and a bit of tension builds. And somebody's going to jump on the boat. It's the most Thunderbirdsy plot.
Yes, and at the very end, there is there's even a Thunderbirds music cue as it trundles towards Moonbase.
Yes,
just to ram home the point. Which it sounds like something from... I forget which. It's almost certainly something from like the Crab Logger or something like that, and which is the slow-moving trundling vehicle Thunderbirds episode. But I have to say that shot was lovely because you had all the kind of sideways shots that you used to, and then suddenly they've put a camera kind of almost mounted behind it as it trundles forwards, and I was like, that's not a shot that you tend to see. A moving camera sort of over-the-shoulder shot, if you can call that, if you can say that a vehicle has a shoulder that you can look over.
Well, a vehicle point of view shot.
Yes.
No, it wouldn't. It would be a. No, you're right. Complete because a point of view shot, you wouldn't be able to see the machine.
So it was all well done.
Ah.
It was all well done.
Yes.
But you're right. I think we've basically said that the B plot is a couple of Thunderbirds episodes bolted together, but with Shadow personnel, and then the A plot. Well, you said it's a bit weird. What do we think about Straker and Josephine Fraser?
Right now, let's just cast our minds back. Now, obviously, we're not watching it in the correct. We're watching it in production order. We're watching it in the preferred fandom order. Yeah.
Well, we're watching it in the order that's on the Blu-ray. Yes.
Yeah. Right. So cast your mind back. What happened last week? His son died.
Oh no, that was 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that was 2 weeks
you've
ago.
already
Sorry.
you've already forgotten Ordeal, which was like the worst episode ever.
Oh, it was the dream episode.
The dream episode,
was.
yes.
All right. So last week, all he did was overreact. This week, 2 weeks ago,
yes,
his son died. But last week, nothing happened. All right, because it
yes,
was a dream episode.
Because it was a dream episode he was in the dream, but that wasn't happening for him. So yes, essentially yes.
Yeah, completely. You're completely right.
We've got the, and I suppose that's interesting, actually, isn't it? Depending on what order you watch them in, depends on what order these things happen for Straker. But with the order that we're going in, yes, you've got the fact that he, at some point in the not too distant past, lost his son, lost his final link with his ex-wife, and then you get this.
Business as usual.
Straker probably hasn't had sex in quite a while, and goes off after this female reporter.
I'm so glad you put it that way around, because that is basically how it's implied. Now, she says things that are just weird as well. Things like, I'm a failed journalist. I haven't had an article published in a month. Yeah, that's a different world. Obviously, she's not the sort of writer I've come across. You actually get to see Straker's house as well at one point, which is, again, you don't see it any other time so far.
Well, he rarely spends any time in his own house because he's always at shadow control.
True. With his built-in TV wall and his collection of muskets. So yeah, there are no actual aliens here. That's fine. She's got a hidden tape recorder. Oh, can I just say though, it was beautiful to see an ordinary C60 tape. I haven't seen one for such a long time. And she got it. I was like, I've recorded this. It's in my bag. I'm thinking, how big's the tape recorder in your bag? That's so cool. It wasn't even a dictaphone tape. It was just a massive C60 thing. Yeah. And I'm thinking, all he needs to solve this problem is a massive magnet, and then it's done.
Or a hammer.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you won't remember this, but every so often when you're out in the 80s, not in the 90s, but in the 80s, you would see blowing on the wind like tumbleweeds in town. Somebody had unspooled a tape or it had uncommon, and you would see it go past. It was a sort of litter of its time.
Oh no, I've seen. Well, in fact, there are certain spiritual groups that record curses on them and then unspool the tape and wrap them round houses to curse you. And I know this because this happened to some friends of mine when I was a student. And they woke up one morning to find...
Was this in Sunderland?
This was in Sunderland, yes. And they woke up...
I rest my case.
They woke up one morning to find that basically someone had festooned an entire tape around their front garden. And somebody knew that this was a practice of some local group and that they were trying to curse the house.
I have honestly never heard of this, and that's a fantastic story.
Well, yes, but so yes, I you know, there's things online where it's like, do you know what the connection between this and this is? And it's a picture of a cassette with a pencil. I'm old enough to know the connection between a cassette and a pencil.
That's all right then.
So yes, right. We have to talk. I mean, now I've got the UFO book by Chris Bentley, like you, and I was wondering if there would be a note in it on this, and there isn't. So I can only assume that I'm wrong. But it doesn't sound quite like her voice. I mean, my only other experience with Jane Merrow is The Prisoner. Spoilers for Prisoner Watch.
Indeed.
And she doesn't quite sound the same in this. And I kept wondering all the way through, is like, well, was she being dubbed by a different actress?
It could just be acting.
Well, it could just be that. And I don't know whether it's just that her post-sync work, so when she's kind of redubbing her lines, whether she's just not very good at it. Because it just... or maybe it's just the editing. There's some very weird editing in this episode. Particularly on the scenes inside the cars, where...
Oh, I know.
You've got kind of several kind of similar but not quite the same angles that they keep cutting back and forth between. And there's just some very odd editing decisions. Which really
I know you've not read the book yet, but there's something really telling inside of it. There's an interview, and it's only a couple of lines, but apparently Ed Bishop, the actor playing the part, he'd been done for drink driving, like really early on in the shoot. So he wasn't actually allowed to drive on the highway.
Right.
And he also hated driving the car.
Right.
Because it had like a hidden gear stick, so that, it was like it had a gear stick, but you couldn't like use the gear stick on camera. So
Yes,
you're always revving it, which is why there's like weird puffs of smoke coming out the back as somebody grinds the gearbox.
I have read that bit, yes, because it was supposed to be you wouldn't have a gear stick on a jet-powered car, so they had to hide the gear stick within the gubbins of the modern design.
So it was a terrible car to drive, apparently.
Yes, and yes, I think the car chase is filmed on an airstrip or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so that was standard practice for ITC.
Yes.
Every so often you would see a high speed trip and you'd go, nobody's got black and white lines on their curbstones. That's definitely, I think it happens in The Prisoner at least once.
Yes, no doubt.
But yeah. Oh, can I just say on the ridiculous sexism/racism front?
Right.
The one thing that I just couldn't forgive in this episode is when Freeman gets brought a coffee by an actress of colour. And he goes, black and sweet. And that's like, just how I like it. So no milk or something. And it's just like, oh dear, please, that's not right.
Yes.
That's back into human resources with you, Alec. I'm sure when he vanishes later on, that's what's actually happened to him. Human resources have just put him somewhere, out of the way. Right, so anything else that you need to talk about? Because I'm out.
Wow, we've got through this one very quickly.
We certainly have.
So we have to talk about the Russians.
Yes.
And there was, and I feel ashamed at myself for not noticing this. Again, this was something picked up in the book. So they've clearly done really well on the Russian lettering. Right. So that you've got the company Sovatek. Though actually the guy pronounces it Sovatex at the end, so he doesn't know what his company's called. But yes, that's spelt with Cyrillic writing. And then you have, I think, the big red button that they have to pull at the end. It says Glavny Regulator, which means like main regulator. So that makes sense. And then Vozdushная пробка, which is airlock, which is what it says on the door that Foster comes through. So I was like, well, clearly, yes, good. I had to look that up, but it taught me what the Russian for airlock was.
Always useful.
And which I think it's one of those things. I think so. The root word of vozdushna is like douche, which is to do with the soul.
Flush?
Well, no, it's to do with it's to do with the soul, and also to do with breath. Okay. Which I think that concept exists in Hebrew as well. Anyway, languages, fascinating things. Anyway,
breath of life, yes.
So the thing that I want to talk about, which is in the book, is the fact that the logo for the company is spelt with a Latin S. So the logo that they're all wearing on their lapels and everything is the wrong alphabet.
Yes.
So it should be a big C, which is the Russian S. Which is right in the spelling of it, but not in the logo. And I was like, I should have noticed that. And the other thing is just the generic dialogue, because this being...
They have got very shiny red suits, though.
Yes. This being filmed when it was, the Russians... the main one who speaks English with a Russian accent is an English actor. The others are played by Poles, I think, because this being... the height of the Soviet Union, you didn't get Russian actors on British telly.
No. But weirdly, they did have the Russian cultural exchange researchers who were buying programs visit the set while it was being filmed.
Okay, I need to read the book. Clearly.
You do. But also, there's one thing that you've just not spotted out of all of this. Why are there Russians on the moon when it was already established there was nobody on the moon because of Dalatech?
Well, oh yes, I had thought that at the time when I was watching this, that they're clearly mining something, possibly. I think they say that at some point.
Yes,
and we know from the Dalatech episode that all the decent mineral deposits have gone. So either we're watching this out of order, which is entirely possible. You could just say, well, you just put Dalatech after this one and say that some time has passed. Or you just say...
I would have just thought they've found more minerals around the back.
You could say that, or there's obviously still global mistrust going on. and the Russians have stuff going on up on the moon,
which also makes sense.
And it's just a cover for whatever it is that they're doing.
No, that completely makes sense. But then again, it's a whole, this is our base over here, and that's fine. But
yes,
so yeah.
I
mean, it's a perfectly workable episode. I've got no I've got some issues with it. Obviously, I've got some real issues with the relationship between Straker and Joe. I mean, she hits him with a vase at one point, and then there's the car chase. It's all a weird version of flirting. And then he kind of loses his temper with her and says, "Was there a plan to get photographs of me?" And it was like, "Well, doing what?" And is she trying to seduce him or not? And he gets cross, and then they leave, and it's just kind of not needed.
Well, I don't think it's not needed. I just think it's very weirdly written and or acted, possibly both.
Yes.
And maybe it's just because the character is somewhat awkward. As far as we can tell, hasn't had any intimate relationships since his wife left him.
Yeah.
The better part of a decade previously. And this Lady Jo Fraser she's clearly damaged by her experiences of the world.
So perhaps they're just two damaged people who found each other.
Yes.
And whether that's a meme or not, we'll get back to.
Well, yeah. But it is odd that he's prepared to kind of go along with her up to a point, and then he finds out that she's more of a criminal than he thought she was.
Yeah.
It's just,
you know what? I had to watch it twice before I got that. It just sounded like they were overreacting, and then there's a storming out, and that's it.
Yes.
And then he gets his seat back.
I think it's partly because the revelation about the things that she's done are done over the phone, quite quietly.
Yeah.
So you have to really pay attention to that bit of the plot to actually hear what it is that she's done. And 1970s TV kisses are just a bit odd, aren't they? It's all kind of very careful to be closed-mouthed, which makes it look
very much
somewhat
so.
unrealistic.
No, you are right. Yeah.
Let's draw a veil over that, shall we?
No, they're all terribly polite.
Yes.
Another thing that's come up in the big book of UFO that I've been reading was just how absolutely smug and how happy everyone was that they could film TV screens on a film monitor. Everyone's just very. It's the first thing most people mention. It was like, well, UFO. That was the program where we learnt to do this. And, because it was one of those things that has always bugged me when I was growing up. Whenever it was like an episode of Bewitched or anything like that, if they were watching TV, they had to, or even Disney films, they had to insert a film insert on top of where the TV screen is in the shot.
Yes.
As a really bad wobbly line effect. But they don't have to do it here. And it always bugged me when I was growing up. It was like, why are they doing that?
Yeah.
And then it took years before I realised there was a whole strobing thing and all that kind of nonsense.
Yes.
But that's the first thing most people mention when they talk about UFO. It's like, oh yes, that was the program where we did this. It was very good. And obviously that's why they do it in the handheld remote communicators in Space 1999 as well later. So that's one of the things that's been playing on my mind. But yes, that's basically the story. You're right. There's no aliens in this at all. So is it just filler? Perhaps, but it's not bad.
It's not bad. It has its moments. It's just a bit odd.
It's not Ordeal.
No. It's better than Ordeal. Yes, I mean, like I said with that, I didn't think there was a worse episode coming up. So if we've given you the impression that this is worse than Ordeal, no, it's not. It's definitely better. But
just if you've got issues with some of the things in UFO, this is when they kind of are at their worst.
Yes.
So far, I mean, I haven't seen everything yet.
Yes, we still have more episodes.
There might be a terribly sexist episode later on.
Yeah, there might be. Oh, the thing we haven't talked about, and this has something in common with the question of priorities, is we get another of these sort of plays within a play when we get some more filming at the film studio, and the bloke gets completely shot to bits with masses of blood, and you're supposed to think Straker's going to walk into a gunfight when he's
an ambush of some
he's
sort,
clearly not, because it's people kind of play acting at the beginning. What did you think
of that?
What
I think that is? I think that is, I've mentioned this before, where they try and sell you on something exciting just to keep your attention because they know there's a lull in the actual narrative.
Yes.
And I think that they go, oh, here have a random bit of tension just to keep you distracted while we build up the actual plot. And I think that's all it is. But it really does work because it does make you go, oh, there you go.
You're like, what's happening?
And it also does remind you that there's a film set studio going on. Because if this was your first episode, you'd be going, what do you mean they're in a film studio? I don't get it. So just for that purpose, that makes sense.
It's the fact that the tension has completely died because Straker walks off and you're like, oh yeah, ha 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 ha. It was just, and then the logo comes up with its kind of dramatic music. So I think I see what you mean, but I think it falls completely and utterly flat if that was its purpose. Well, but I love the fact that you do. It's more kind of behind the scenes of how these shots are shot. So you get to see the overhead boom, and you get to see the reflective boards for the lighting and everything. And you realise that those same techniques that you're seeing in front of the camera are being used behind the camera to capture the shots that we're watching that make up the programme UFO. So it's all very meta about how the show works.
That's exactly the word. But yeah, you're right. All-knowing. Mind you, though, this was the first episode where I started realising that this is just Gerry Anderson's wishful thinking, that he is actually in charge of a secret organisation set out to take out aliens in real life, and it was all a triple bluff. Yeah, it was him and Lou Grade.
Him and Lou Grade.
Yeah, secretly controlling Earth's defences.
Yes.
Can I just say that is fan fiction waiting to happen? Lou Grade, Defender of the Earth. Which explains a lot. Is that why Michael Grade wanted to cancel Doctor Who? Because that signal was going out into space and it was giving out bad vibes to actual aliens.
I don't really want to think anything more about Michael Grade, to be honest.
No, no. He walked past me once and I didn't have a recorder.
What would you have asked him if you'd seen him?
Why? Why do you hate it so much? Go on. Just why do you hate Doctor Who so much? Sorry, I've dragged this back to Doctor Who, and I apologise profusely.
Yes, you have.
To anyone who it upsets. I suspect it's going to be very few people.
I think if anybody's still listening who doesn't like us talking about Doctor Who, well, they're very long suffering, and we thank you for sticking with us.
I thank you from the bottom of any organ you care to mention.
Yes, any that you still have that haven't been taken by aliens.
Yes, or recycled, or whatever, yes.
Shall we go on to... well, we've only got one watch this week. We've got Prisoner Watch.
Prisoner Watch, but it's the main woman.
It's Jane Merrow, Josephine Fraser. So where have you seen her before, Michael?
Is it The Prisoner?
Yes, it is.
I can't place her, and I know the thing is, right, I'm not good with people out of context. I've come to learn that over the last few weeks. The minute you take someone out of one program and put them in something else, it takes me ages to go, oh yeah.
Well, I'll put you out of your misery.
Please.
So she plays Alison, which is interesting. She's actually one of the few people in The Prisoner who actually gets a name and not just a number. Alison, who was
the psychic?
Number 24. Yes, she is. Well done.
She's the psychic with the cards.
With the cards in the Schizoid Man. Yes. So it's one of the kind of larger guest roles for a woman in The Prisoner, and yes, she appears to have some kind of ESP link with number 6. We have one other person in Prisoner Watch.
Oh, tell me more.
So Patrick Jordan, who played Commander Dudzinski, I can't even pronounce his name.
The Commander.
Dudzinski, yeah. He's not named on screen, but that's his name in the
yes,
credits. Did you recognise him?
No.
I think his role in The Prisoner, he had much darker hair. So whether he dyed it for that or whether he happened to go grey in the couple of years between filming. So he is a very small role, but it's in the non-Patrick McGoohan episode of The Prisoner. Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. So he's the guy on the desk called Danvers. When Nigel Stock turns up and says, "I'm number 6," and starts giving out code names to try and prove that he's who he says he is.
Yes.
Yeah, so there we go. So that's Prisoner Watch for the week. And next week, what are we looking at? What next week? I keep saying next week. We do these every fortnight. Next fortnight.
Next time. On the next episode.
What are we looking at, Michael?
We've got The Square Triangle.
Okay, well, we'll see you then.
Starring the bloke out of Emmerdale. See you then.
See you. You have been listening to the UFOcast with me, Luke, from Tmudwup.
And me, Michael, from the Tin Dog Podcast.
Please get in touch with the show. Let us know what you think and any feedback you might have at ufocast@yahoo.com.
Or on Twitter at UFO_cast. Available on Stitcher and iTunes. "2018 brings with it 3 brilliant conventions, all held at the Derby Quad. ShadowCon 2. The UFO convention will be on June the 30th, 2018. Hooverville, the best little Doctor Who convention in the world, is on Saturday the 1st of September, while Big Finish Day is on the 3rd of November 2018. All tickets are available from the Derby Quad website. That was the Doctor Who Tin Dog Podcast, available on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, RSS, Vimeo, and across the internet. Doctor Who and its associated properties are all copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Why not become a supporter by visiting patreon.com/tindog. Contact the show on tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.